93, got that beat.
What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. In every episode, we get the distinct pleasure and honor to speak to a brother or sister that's doing exceptional work in every field of human endeavor. And they share their God stories, the ways in which God has been at work in their life and the ways in which God has been at work in their work. And today is no different, man. We you know, I know people know Mount Rainier. People know the old Supersonics, you know.
Bring them back.
I mean, there's more things we could talk about the great state of Washington and Seattle, but this brother is well traveled. He's not limited there. Even right now, he finds himself in Florida, with my fam down there, but also rocking through Atlanta. But I'm giving all of these because I'm just excited about this conversation, because I always think it has to be divine to find people who are so clear about giving their life for the lives of others. That's number one. Number two, I do believe there's something happening. There's something in the world that's happening. It's been happening over time, but there's something about our young boys and having a mind to recognize, particularly brothers, those of melanation, black, brown, young boys, how education needs to be different, how education needs to be redeemed, how they need to be able to see themselves, to become full men called, and people who could dedicate themselves to that in this time. And Marcus is one of them. He's one of many, but he's one of them who's given his life to educate, but in a real, I would say, in a supernatural and otherworldly way. But I'm only scratching the surface because there's much more that he has done, much more that he is doing, and much more we believe in faith that he will do. And so I need to introduce my brother, your brother, our brother, Marcus Harden. What's going on, King?
I'm good, brother. I need to take you everywhere with me. That's a powerful intro. I think I can get a lot more gigs in that way. Yeah, we're going to have to work together. No, I'm well. I'm blessed, and I say that all the time. I'm blessed. I'm here getting to talk to you, and if I look through you, like I said, I get to see the sandy beaches of Miami, Florida, and so it's a blessing. And I'm here. I don't call it work. I'm here operating in purpose, getting to serve and do those things. So. I'm blessed.
Oh man, it is certainly dope. It would have been a different summer if Miami made it like last year, but we ain't in bubble life. It's a little different.
I'll figure that out. Let's not embark on that. But I'm proud of my team. I'm a loyal fan, and so the thing is, faith of the mustard seed. Right?
Hey, so, man. It certainly, man. But clearly, man, I can't do you any justice. But let's start with, man, who is Marcus Harden?
Oh, man, that's a big question. I could give you the Twitter bio, right, which is, born and raised in Seattle, Washington. I'm the only child. My parents saw fit to hear from the Lord to just do it once, and so that's what they did. I said they found perfection, but, different people will tell you different things.
Indeed. We know how that goes.
They were living a really blessed life. Originally from Seattle, like I said, went to elementary school, middle school there, Rainier Beach High School, for those who are familiar with the Seattle area, basketball factory. And, just discussing earlier a little bit, I come from a family of faith. My mother believes in it deeply, and I had a praying granny on her side. And then my grandfather on my dad's side was a 6'10" Baptist minister. So he's where I get my height from. And my dad's 5'10", my mom's maybe 5'3". So for a long time, I thought I was adopted because I sit at 6'6", in an ever lightening mystery weight. But, we did it from there. And who I am has just evolved into what I've always known. I've always known God, even if I didn't have language behind it. So, I always, as a young person, I was sensitive, I guess, whatever you want to call it, because I just felt people. There wasn't words or verbiage to that. And sometimes with young people, we don't name those things. We just be like, stop all that. We don't nurture that gift. And so the one thing I've always knew is that I just had an attachment to people. I didn't know where that came from. That took a little later in the journey. But I've always known that. So was just a kid who loved people. I have a heart for people. I have a heart for seeing people well, and I have a belief for the best in people. So, was able to go through that journey, went to college and did all that fun stuff. I was able to just discover a lot of pieces of myself in between there.
Brother, man, you one of the things is refreshing, man. You and I are chopping offline, and similarly, man, we align on many things. We'll talk about a little bit about that in that conversation, but also sensing people's spirits or feeling connected to people in ways that you feel more connected to people than people feel connected to you. You just feel connected to people, and I can understand. I think a struggle many people have in these times and is often like, God, what are you asking me to do? Right. Many of the people who listen to this, not necessarily, Christian, they're professionals, executives. And even though they're at a place where externally they still feel like, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Right. When did you recognize you had a supernatural gift of teaching? Because here's what I mean by that. Like, in some sense, you're like supernatural, like we're going to talk but I say this to say, when you even as you're giving inventory of some of those things that you sensed in yourself, like I feel connected to people, I like people, I want to serve people, I want people to be better, to be well. Usually people put this against a list of things that they can or cannot do, or job titles, and they're like, I don't know where this fits in, right? And then you come through with the Scottie Pippen hype, and then people are like, oh nah, he got a ball, and then now you come through. Right. And so when did you sense like, okay, God, this is the path for me? You called me to be a teacher. No matter what real title I have, I'm a teacher.
That's an interesting. I think if I was honest doing that inventory, I would say elementary. I think
Emerson. Shout out Emerson.
Yeah. I would say the one thing I learned early was that people listen to me for no matter what. And the thing that surprised me as a young person is not only to my peers, but like adults, like for whatever reason. And I'm not naive to the fact that I think, I was always a taller kid, I always presented older to some people. So I think for whatever reason, adults, I would just be around adult conversations. Then all of a sudden adults would be like, well, what do you think about this? Or, and then all of a sudden, if you're hanging around enough, they're like, man, I'm struggling with my marriage. And I'll be like, oh, well, you should just be nice and be kind. You start there. But if you were asking me specifically about the profession of teaching, it was the last thing I wanted to do. My mother ran a home daycare. I'm an only child. So I don't think I was spoiled, but I was quite privileged.
That's a euphemism. So, if you ask me,
I got most of the things I wanted. Yeah. But I didn't enjoy children. I was like, no, this is not it. I knew two things. I was like, I don't want to work with children. I don't want to work with my hands. I knew I didn't really want to be manual labor-y. So my undergraduate is in political science and psychology. I really wanted to go into politics. I wanted to have this big platform. I really wanted to be the first Black president. I say it all the time. Somebody clearly beat me to it. Yeah. But that was my ideal. And on the journey to there, this is where I believe God makes no mistakes. My last quarter at the University of Washington, I had to take a community kind of studies class. And my assignment, randomly generated, right, was to go to an elementary school and to work and mentor with young people. And I was paired with a good buddy of mine at the time to work with this group of 13 students. And the next thing I knew, I was volunteer. I fell in love. I fell in love with those students. I was volunteering. I would leave class, come up to the school. I was only supposed to be there 2 hours a week. I was doing 10 to 12. And I was like, what's happening to me? Like, this isn't the path, God. Like, no, we got other plans. And I had, at that point, accepted an internship in the U.S. Senate. So I was an intern for Hillary Clinton. So I graduated. I moved to D.C. And my first assignment was on the widow's tax. So it was on supporting widows who were being heavily taxed for their husband's passing. And then I was tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, there's this new thing we want to really research, and it's educational equity in the city of New York. We would love for you to lead that. And so then I started researching education from a policy and kind of equity lens, and I'd never seen it like that. And at the same time, the tug to serve, I realized at that level, you're not with the people. I'm definitely a kinsman. I always said if I ever, garnered the title of true minister, I'd be that guy on the street corner. Like, I want to be amongst the people, right? That's what Jesus was. Jesus was a kinsman redeemer. And so, I fell in love with it from that lens. And then I literally came back to visit two of the young men who I had taken on as mentees in that journey. And I walked in and this woman walked out. I didn't think anything of it. I walked into the office and the principal said, the counselor just quit. I heard the kids love you. what would it take to get you back? I literally interviewed on the spot. They had a young man who was crying in the office. I'll never forget this. He was crying in the office, and they were like, let's see what you can do. I took the young man on a walk. We went outside and shot hoops and, talked about the issue, talked it over, gave him some tips and tools. He came back. They were like, what do you think about him? They're like, he's great. Can he stay? And then they made me an offer that Friday, and I flew back to DC that Friday night, flew back to Seattle that Monday. It was February of 2005. And I ended up being at that school for 9 years. So that was how the journey started.
Good.
And, unexpected, but it's so funny now. I can't see myself doing anything else, but empowering, not empowering, I don't like that word, but speaking into and creating spaces for young people to thrive. And as I've grown older now and more mature, also creating those healing spaces for adults to thrive, because most teachers in my walk thus far, I realize are also just unhealed adults, unhealed children that manifest a lot of those same things. And so that was the initial journey, and it's been I could have never scripted it, even where I'm at right now. I couldn't have scripted it. So, but it's all been God,
brother. This is. Man, I mean, that's a moment. You're like, she coming out, it's just like, well, Miss Levias, and like, lean on me, like, Miss Levias, like, so, literally in this moment. But what was interesting is that, your first instinct, even in that moment, was to take him on a walk. And I always say that I think there's a unique way to relate to young boys and young men. A lot of people say, like, there's certain times where you're face to face, but brothers, you interact shoulder to shoulder. Like, let's go play, let's do something together, and build. And so even when I think about just kind of like the kind of creating excellence and the work that you do through ACE, how did just like kingdom mindedness infuse in the foundation of the work that you do there, right? Like how do you infuse it? Because typically when people think education, they're like, there can't be any faith in this, there can't be any in this. So like, how did that fuse out and multiply what you did in that moment? Good artists create, great artists steal, right? And so I will say I learned a lot from a sermon I once heard from Bishop T.D. Jakes. And he said you have to make your message potent enough for people to taste, but palatable enough to people to be able to digest it, right? And so when I realized I couldn't say God in that same way in school, although I've worked in primarily Black schools, so I'm able to get away with it, but. But how do you hide it in the veil sometimes? Because people sometimes aren't ready for that, right? And I think you said something powerful earlier about, I actually would argue that people know what they're called to do. It's having the courage to accept the call, right? So we spend our lives in that tension with God, and we go to God asking him for something else when he's already told us. The assignment's already been given, right? It's just not the way we want to do it. But to answer your question, our first baseline is knowledge of self, right? We were talking off camera, what I was saying, like, a powerful activity I was able to do today is I have young men research their name. What is your name? And then the second phase of this activity, I'm giving away all my stuff. Is to, this is IP,
is
y'all.
to ask your parents. Yeah, you're good. Is to ask your parents why they named you that, right? And so we begin to cultivate conversation of the power of naming, but one, knowing who you are in the world, stripping away all of the physical things. So you can't tell me who you are based on size, status, all those things. Like, who are you and what drives you? And then most importantly, when we have conversations with young men, we never tell them, we ask the question, what does it mean to be a man? And the only answer we ever give is a man takes responsibility for his actions, whether he's right or wrong. Beyond that, we give no parameters. But what we do say is that a man is somebody who knows himself, knows his community, and knows something that is greater than him, right? We start with the premise of love. And the way I'm able to hide it is then I always say God is love, right? So if we just start with love and I lead you on the journey towards love, there's no way you won't be able to find God.
Man. I think there, you and the work that you've done through ACE and, the districts that you serve, just blessings on the grant that you received and were able to at least create a space for, teachers and Black educators, as you kind of talk about teachers need that healing. And then for students, but what you're talking about, as we talked offline, is just, there's so many young boys coming up with no direction on what it means to even just contemplate what it means to be a man. That doesn't come across. And so just the fact that you pay some framework, right? Whether people agree, it's some framework, I think is anchoring for young boys so they don't find it somewhere. Were you ever, because I think as you talk about your covering, in some sense, intergenerational covering from a spiritual perspective and to your grandfather and I, when were you one of the young boys that you teach now?
We were talking a little bit earlier. I would say I didn't discover God in the real way to me until my end of my senior year of high school. We were going to celebrate. We had left one of my favorite restaurants. We had just seen a movie. We were coming back home. We were on the freeway. It was raining because it's Seattle. It's 90% of the time. And I had just gotten a Blazer, Chevy Blazer, from my parents, and was going to drive it to college because I was going to go to college, Mennonite school in Kansas, a month later. And so was driving this Blazer with my best friend and two close female friends in the backseat behind us. And we got cut off and I spun. And then the next thing I know, I woke up and I was facing the wrong way of traffic. And we literally were on the freeway edge where if we had toppled over, we fall down into a ravine below. And I wake up. And the song, I'll never forget, Heavy D, and it just kept on skipping. It's just an interlude, y'all. It's just an interlude. It's just an interlude, just an interlude. And I looked down. We were hit so hard, my shoes had popped off, right? But they were still tied. My best friend had flown into the back, and like we're seeing oncoming traffic, and I'm just so disheveled and disoriented. And I think it was two men. I really couldn't tell you. Opened the doors, got us out, got us to the other side of the freeway, and then honestly, just disappeared. And then my friends who had come behind us had to turn all the way around and come back. And by the time we were good, we were on the side of the freeway and, our parents were called and all that stuff. But I just remember I don't remember who those men were, right? And they just showed up and bounced. And then two, I was like, man, there's no reason we should have survived, right? Like nothing, everything went wrong for that not to happen. And I just was like, that has to be God. And we all walked away unscathed for the most part. My friend had to go get checked out for a concussion, but the only thing that was damaged was the car. And that was for me when I really started wanting to have a deeper understanding of God, because I was like, not just in the Savior aspect, but in we all have to be here for a reason, right? Because it may have been our time. And then I just really got deeper into understanding it and really fell in love specifically with Paul in the biblical setting, but just the rest of the Bible. And that's kind of how I knew a bit of a calling. And again, coming back to, once again, even after the accident, all my friends would come back to me and be like, what did you think? And I was like, man, I'm checking out the Bible and then all of a sudden we're talking about in a different way before we go to school. And, I go to school in Kansas and I meet the school I went to was a Mennonite school. So a lot of the people we went there were missionaries who were coming as well. And so I met this young man who had never befriended or met a Black person before. He literally touched my skin. He was from South Dakota, a small little town, South Dakota. Literally touched my skin and was like, "Oh, are you a rapper?" And I was like,
"Woo, no. This ain't the way to begin, but grace."
Right. Me now, I probably had a different reaction. Me then, I was, super still naive or whatever. But and he meant no harm by it. I don't believe to this day. Yeah. But it was amazing because he was probably the first one to tell me, he was like, "I see God in you." And I was like, you just rubbed my skin. I don't know. But we made an incredible friendship, bonding actually over football. He was a huge John Elway fan. I was a Dan Marino fan. Dolphins, Miami, here we are. And I'll never forget at the end of that year, so we would end up praying together. He really taught me how to navigate the Bible in a different way, in a very intellectual way. I will say I'm a much more intellectual connoisseur of the Bible and of spirituality than I am emotional. And not to say I'm not emotional about it, but I'm a teacher, right? So that's how I digest God. But he ended up writing this beat. I still have it to this day. He had a signed John Elway poster that he gave to me. He left it on my dorm room. He left before I did, and he gave it to me and wrote a beautiful scripture, Proverbs 18:27-29. A man may shew himself friendly, find many brothers, blah blah blah. And then just left a beautiful note about how I transformed his notion of what a Black man could show up as, and how he's going to go back into his community and start shaking some of those racial divides up. And I literally, everywhere I've traveled since then, I take that poster with me. And so again, just those encounters have shown me that God just shows up, and sometimes God shows up when I'm not ready. But I get to listen. So
this is, man, that's especially here, right? There are two things that come up for me, in hearing this, and I think for many people who may be watching and listening, there's one thing which is just these moments where it's just like, I didn't have to be here, I didn't have to be protected, God the protector. Definitely, I'm here for a reason. I had to Kanye through the wire. You know what I'm saying? Shout out Shaka, but I had a through the wire moment. Like I gotta get this thing done. And then there's the flip side that sometimes, if people don't have those moments, right, those extreme moments where they feel that maybe their stuff's not working, or like I can't speak in tongues, or I can't do this, or But when I just think of the nature of the work that you're doing, right, this is not you have this business model, accretive product, and you're bringing in $50 million a year. That's a faith journey, period, right? And so how have God had to close the gap for you? Because I know that work. I know the work of Family Dinner Foundation and going and chasing dollars and chasing grants and chasing this and So what has that looked like? How has God had to close the gap in those ways where you're like, okay, God, you're continuing to affirm me in this work because you keep showing up?
How long is this episode? It has been, packed into that journey between, I would probably say the school I was at and now. So last 15 years, I decided to become a foster adoptive parent. So I overnight went from being a single man, who had just purchased my childhood home, to literally one Saturday I was in Cabo. The next Saturday I was making taco night for 4 young men because I had taken 4 young men into my care. And I made the agreement that they could stay as long as they wanted, as long as they finished school and, just had this safe space. And so at 26, I found myself being a single dad of 4 young men, the greatest honor in my life at the time. And things were good until they weren't. The recession hit a little bit, and it was the senior year for my 2 oldest. And I found myself, making a lot less money. My mother ill, so I was paying my mortgage, her mortgage, flying back and forth down to California at the time before she moved back up to Seattle. And God just made a way. Like I still to this day cannot tell you how I was paying bills, how I was putting food on the table. I made some financial adjustments, of course, but the money out was not the money in. And I remember just every night, make this work. And then I would say on the business end, and that's why I smiled when you said it. It's been a labor of love. Myself and my 2 best friends, the founders, we're entering year 9, but we weren't paid employees until last summer. It hadn't been a full year yet. I mean, I still look at the bank account and get surprised when I see my own organization's name putting in a positive debit into my account. And so it's been faith, but we never did it, and we still don't. Not to give too much on the air, I guess, but we're even an upside down organization. The 3 founders, we're the 3 lowest paid people in the organization. We make sure our people are taken care of. We make sure the young men that we're serving get the best experience possible. And then we do what needs to be done to make it happen. And that's just a belief and a foundational principle we have. Will it always be like that? I don't know. But depends on the donations. But for the moment, we believe strongly in that. So I'll just say it's always happened. And even last year, in the midst of the pandemics, both of them, COVID and racism, we're sitting at a crossroads, just kind of trying to figure out what we're going to do next. And literally this, as you spoke of, this last money from the city of Seattle came from a phone call. A brother called me and said, would y'all be interested in doing some work on Saturdays with these young men who are just kind of, this is in month 4 or 5 of the pandemic, who are just kind of sitting at home, who need just some touch, because at this point, young people weren't showing up to class at all. And I was like, sure. And I didn't know he wanted it right then. He was like, okay, bet. And then next thing you know, we have a phone call and they're like, name your price. And we kind of just built it to say, dream big. So what if? And we named our price, and then that price was met. Like, looking back now, I'm like, we should have named.
I know exactly. That's the worst thing when you're like, they didn't counter it though.
They just fired back with an email that said, yes, we want to be in partnership and do the work with you. And so I think it's all been by faith. And the powerful thing is, and I'll be very transparent with this. I'm so much of a community and community builder that the online platform wasn't exciting for me, especially with the person that kind of co-designs and creates our programming. What's been so beautiful and powerful is, we've had young men who have connected virtually every Saturday since September, ended a couple of weeks ago, and in our surveys and in our in-person events now that we've been able to have, still testify in the same way of the connection they've had with each other, connection they've had with young people, and how they've built a stronger bond. And so to me, it just has to be God in the way we're pushing relationship and then just rethinking and redesigning what learning is. It's not school, it's learning. And, coming back to the original premise of starting with knowledge yourself. And one of our big things we always say is you're not your brother's keeper, you are your brother's brother. And we have to bring that back to society, right? I believe that is what is lost. Even if we don't agree, that is still your brother, right? And you have to be accountable for them. And I think especially in regional areas like Seattle, where the Black and brown population is small, and gentrification has taken its toll on what we knew as community in a regional matter, we have to be intentional about creating those spaces. And so that's what we love to do. I'm super proud of the fact that we have, 14 staff members, everybody's Black or brown. We have 8 male educators. And if you know those stats, only 2% of the population are Black males. But in Seattle, for us to have, we're prepping for our summer program next week, our young men are going to walk into 2 separate programs that have nothing but Black men teaching them, and nothing but Black men running it, and Black women, holding it down for us in those spaces. And they will get that no place else in Seattle. In Atlanta, different conversation. But in Seattle, they won't. Yeah. And I'm super proud of it. And more proud maybe of the people who stuck with us. We can't, not that I would want to, but we can't fire people, right? We people are like, man, I'm coming back.
Yeah.
And so it's beautiful to see. And to your point earlier, even the growth in the adults, I'm super proud of, 3 of our staff members who started off just being okay with being hourly employees. And, we would provide them opportunity and resource to go become certificated teachers, not just to build the number, but to be able to build economic gain for their family. And I'm super proud of all 3 of them. One who looked me in the face 4 years ago and told me, I'm never going to be a teacher. That's for suckers, who just finished his teaching program Saturday.
Fam.
So that's, it's clearly I can be more proud about those, but faith has gotten us there. And I think doing right by people.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to showing the God in all of us. And I'm thankful my co-founders are both, men of God as well. So it works out great.
This is, I'm gonna let that breathe a little bit, man. This is important. I want to go a little deeper in this, because I think whether you're a leader or whether you're one who supports a leader or is praying for a leader who's a servant, this is always an interesting conversation, right? Because you kind of sometimes have people on extremes, which is it's almost like the suffering servant. Jesus wasn't, the work was not finished. I got to finish it for him. And so right. You have this kind of dynamic where it's just like, I got to suffer. And so there's a beautiful thing of it mirrors a upside down kingdom where the King of Kings was washing feet, right? On the flip side, you hear so many leaders, you hear from King and to X and to all these people who left poor, quote unquote, but obviously went to eternal riches, depending on what your beliefs in were, but the family was struggling or things were happening or all these stuff like that. And so I always wonder, how do you connect with God, or what is your rhythm to ensure that you don't burn yourself out, right? You don't burn yourself out, because I think particularly for someone who is connected with community, loves people, you also carry burdens too. You carry the weight of what they're navigating. So what's your rhythm with God to ensure that you actually have the paradoxical equilibrium, I could call it, of caring, recognizing there is suffering in this and there will be suffering, but I also need to take care of myself to be good sustainably over time?
I'll first just say, the parable of life's lessons, right? So, I will be the first to tell anyone I burned out before, right? Telling that parable of my young men then. But at the end of that journey, I was done. I found myself just in this unique place, and the walls kind of started crumbling. But I've, Dr. Maya Angelou says it best, there's always a rainbow in the clouds, right? And so in my life, it's been a series of events of adversity, but then quickly met with revelation, quickly met with a level of just quick retribution and, just an ability to God, rebound. And
Talk
so
about
for me, at the end of that,
talk about one of those moments, man.
So the end of that journey, I ended up, I decided to give it all up, and I sold everything but my house. My boys had moved on to college, and my cousin said, "Man, you're not well." Like I can tell by talking to him. And he played basketball overseas in Spain, and so he said, "If you can get here, I'm gonna take care of you. I got you." And so I bought a one-way ticket to Spain. And I remember reading one of my favorite books, The Alchemist. But again, similar to what we were talking about earlier, I found God all in that.
Coelho.
And I read The Alchemist. Yeah. I read The Alchemist for not even half the flight, a quarter of the flight. And then I remember crying myself to sleep. And the next thing I knew, I woke up and they were like, "Welcome to Madrid." And the flight attendant was like, "What did you take?" I said, "Life." But I remember getting to Spain and my cousin just saying, "Man, you've done so much for everybody else. Just enjoy this." Like all I had to do was watch the dog and pay for bowling every Tuesday. Beyond that, it was just my time to replenish. And I'll say there was another moment similar to the accident where I found God, but I found God in stillness. I found God in not having to be a martyr to the work, right? And really reimagine what that would look like. Because I knew what I didn't want to do was, in my pain, I was becoming resentful, right? And so I was like, I don't want to be that though. And in my stillness, I was able to see it in such a different land. So coming back to the States about 7 months later, I really had a new kind of purpose and vision. And now I would say what has held me steady is a lot of just routine. Every morning, for the most part, that's 94% of the time. If I don't grab my phone first, I get up and I just ask God, what would you have me do? And give me the strength to move through the day. And I think as a servant, you've also learned to say no, or to say not right now. Or to know what you can give. And what I've been so grateful to God for is again, that discernment of, I liken it to the Matrix, again, seeing movies. But Neo clearly being a biblical character, but let's just for the sake of the argument. But when he realizes he's the one, or he's ordained, the first thing that happens is the world slows down. Right. This is where you get the bullet time. It's where you get all of those things. And for me, that was my Neo moment of like the world began to slow down and I just was able to see things so much more clear and I was able to see myself. And so I would say this last 7 to 8 years has been on this journey to like fully love myself in the way that God sees me, and not in the way that people saw me, because I was worried about that before. And now I'm so free. And continuing in that journey, knowing it's not over, right? Again, I quote Dr. Adjah, one of my favorite quotes is Oprah asked her, when do you know you've known enough? And she said, I'm en route. And I feel like I'm en route with God. And so that is where I've gone. So, for people listening, I would say, take heed to that inner voice. And I think once I realized I can only be what I can be, but to be effective in that, as an athlete, right? Even athletes say, Kobe would be like, the game slowed down. I'm here on a venture with some athletes and a former professional player, a brother who I'm working with. He was just talking to a young man and he said, slow down. He's like, because youth and impetuousness will have you wanting to rush to everything. But, hopefully wisdom brings you the ability to be like, nah, we'll take it a little slower. So that connection with God is real. And when I'm unsure, I just pause. And I don't care if I'm in the middle of a room talking to 1,000 people. I don't care if I'm in front of young men, and especially by myself. I just kind of take that pause and ask God, what would you have me do? And that has worked so far.
Bro, this man, you done stepped on, you stepped on a whole bunch of Jordan 11s, man. A whole bunch, like this is like a whole bunch, right? This servant, I'm raising my hand in this and have been in that place. But I think this is uniquely, as you speaking about it, is one, just the humility of recognizing I haven't already arrived, right? I'm en route, as Dr. Angelo said, I'm en route. And I think that's refreshing here. I think it also leads me, because I think we as men, and I'm going to speak, sometimes people are hyper idiosyncratic. I'm like, generally men are this way, right? That's all the conversation. But there's this, you got to have it together. You got to have a plan. You carrying the weight. Nobody gives a dang about you. Nobody feel your pain. You got carried. Nobody cares. Right. we feel that, right? We can't even our sisters who love us. They don't get. It's not the same. It's not the same, right? And so, but I want to flip this though, even when it comes to the work, because now look, when I think about what you're doing in right now, even just in Miami right now, but obviously this is part of a scaled work and program. I'm like, every city needs this. Man, like, yo, like I didn't think about message. Like I get exposure. I have these conversations with my nephews, right? Like single mom. I'm like, it's like you're making them. You're like, you're like, you're not being harsh. You don't want to exasperate the children, but you're also being loving. You're doing all that because you know they need it. What gives you the view of like embracing the hyper local, right? Because like God is like just being faithful with what you have, like the quiet, simple life. I don't need to be big to be effective. I want to go deep. You're kind of like the Dame Lillard, but like on Seattle, you're like, yo, this is my city. I ain't just gonna hop around. What gives you what is the conversation with God, or how do you think you're gonna determine whether or not you're like, we need this in Camden. We need this in Baltimore. We need this in Detroit. Should I do this? Should I not? Where are you in that process now? And what has wisdom shown you over time? What has God taught you over time around knowing expansion versus contraction versus nurture where you're at right now?
God has always taught me through parable of people. And so one of my biggest lessons to now get to answer your question was from this young man, Roman, who I had, who, struggled, single mom, was into the gang life, would come to school, but not do anything. And Roman was just tough, man. And I remember I was like, I'm gonna be his guy. He gonna love me. He gonna love Mr. Marcus. And so I remember every day I'd bring Roman to McDonald's. I'd take him out. We would play chess. We played basketball. And I remember one day he looked, we were talking about gang life and the choices he was making. And I was like, man, I've lived in DC, I've lived in LA. Like, man, Roman, like, that's not the life you want. It's really tough there. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and said two things. He was like, you cool, but I don't really like you. One, like, to stun my ego. Everybody loves you. And then two, he was like, and, as far as the gang life, it's real to me. And both of those things checked me, because to answer your question, parable one was, I don't have to be the person, right? And I think sometimes we get out of the way. I feel, or I believe, that God has sent me to cultivate ideas, cultivate minds, and to spread it. But there's so many beautiful, powerful people in their own communities who have context doing this work. Because as I've learned in Atlanta, when I first did my presentation in Atlanta, I had a beautiful, wise sister walking to me. She said, "Baby, I love this, but your Seattle money doesn't spend here." Right. And her thing, I didn't take the time or understand the Atlanta context, despite the fact that this, is a good thing. We universally agree it's a good thing. And then secondly, to his point of, I don't like you. Ego is the enemy. Mm-hmm. So I had to get out of the way and say, I'm spending all this time trying to make this young man connect with me. Instead, I could be using that same energy just to find the person who does connect with him. Ooh. Right. And because that's the goal. The goal is not to connect with me. I don't have to be his personal savior. The goal is to get him to better, right? And then to greater. And so then it became this gentleman named, Miss Furtis, who was like the school mama. He loved Miss Furtis. Miss Furtis could have looked at him and he would have straightened up and, flew him right. So it was like, no, make that connection with her and get out the way. And we can establish a rapport of respect and relationship. And so to your point, to me, it's building alliances. It's building an ecosystem, because what I really pray for, it doesn't matter if you're an ACE, it doesn't matter if you're doing Boys and Girls Club, it doesn't matter what you're doing. I want us as Black men especially to come together around a conversation that when young Black men are in our care, they see God, they see love in the same way. It may look different, right? But they're like, and I say this all the time, and maybe you've experienced this as a teacher and now a leader and a practitioner, as a principal. I know good school when I see it. Mm-hmm. Like when I walk into a building, I can smell it. I can see it. You can almost taste it. It's the senses, right? And I almost feel the same with church, right? You kind of know good church, right? Whatever that means, you know it. I want young people to be able to walk in environments where they feel seen and heard, and valued, right? To know that they matter. And I think so many of the issues that we have today, and I'm, clearly not the first mouth to say this, but so many of our young men don't know their worth. And it's not because they're worthless. It's because we don't ask the questions and then identify and give them words to be able to do that. So one of our ceremonies is Champ of the Day. I'm a big professional wrestling fan, no judgment out there in the universe. one of the things I love about it is the pomp and circumstance, but I love a good championship belt. And so what we do is base our champ of the day over our values, which is family, academics, motivation, and environment. Because we say everybody wants to be famous, right? But we want you to be famous in those ways, starting with family. And our routine is that the first champ of the day or champ of the week is selected by the adults because we want to model the way. But after that, the young men choose the next person. But we say, we ask that you choose it based on these values, and you have to describe and tell a story of when you saw this thing happen, right? And then announce the person and hand them the belt. That's part of the ceremony. And then when the person gets the belt, they have to answer, what's your gift, right? And if they don't know, this is where the power of we build an intentionally community. If they don't know, then we ask their brothers to each give an adjective to say what they will. And the power of that is now we're reaffirming and able to see mirrors and windows, right? We're able to now see from other people's view who we are. Because the challenge with so many young men is they just don't have the language to say, like, this is what I am. When you ask, I just asked a group of 7 young men this morning, like, what's the wisdom you bring into the room? And they all just kind of stared at me, so then I had to, we had to break it down and say, like, what is the thing? And one is like, I'm a beautiful artist. One I told you is a man who was like, man, I know God. One was like, man, I love to cook, and then we started talking about this. And I was like, well, what does cooking do? What do you love about cooking? Do you love the food? No, I love how people feel when I cook it. Oh, and now it's like, and we had to just have those deeper conversations and with them with men. And I think the one thing we do is I'm vulnerable in front of my young men. I tell them, I went bankrupt. I tell them, I had to rebound from that. I tell them, I struggle. Sometimes I told these young men this morning, I was like, man, I was nervous meeting y'all yesterday because this is my first time encountering them in this space. And, we fire off with love. And I tell them after the first time I meet them after 45 minutes, if nobody's told you they love you today, I'm telling you right now. And I look them all in the eyes and tell them I love them. And I mean that, right? The greatest honor in my life is being able to take into care the most important thing in somebody else's world. I don't treat that like this isn't a game to me. And the moment it stops feeling like that, I'll walk away. You'll see me at Costco boxing boxes or doing DoorDash or something, but I won't be in this work.
Bam. Woo! You brother, this is not going to be the only conversation we have. I have to say this, man. Sometimes, it's scary, and I think for those who listen to many who may even just kind of been scraping the surface of the Bible and reading it. I mean, I think both of us love storytelling and movies and things, and like the Bible got a lot. It like you go find what you're looking for. But sometimes you'll read things, and then the scary things is like when you see it today. And, like there's this book about like kind of Isaiah and early in Isaiah when the women said like, the women didn't want the men, they just wanted their name so they can get like, so it was just like, whoo. But then there's a flip side of it, like when you talk about the widows, right? The fatherless, that's consistently through, the biblical narrative and how our definitions are often very selfish definitions of fatherhood have to come crashing down because the math ain't mathing. The math ain't mathing. No. There are not enough fathers. No. And so we discussed this earlier. Yep. We were talking about, I'm a big superhero fan. And if you know the canon of the ethos or the mythos of many of them, most of them are fatherless, right? Like that is the beginning of the tale. Spider-Man's an orphan. Batman's an orphan. Superman's an orphan. Wonder Woman's an orphan. Like you can go down the line. Thor lost his mother. Like Iron Man. Like I literally could start naming them all. Black Panther. And I believe all those things come from biblical canon. I believe they're just told in a way for to commercialize and fantasize and maybe for folks who want to run away because people get scared of the word God. There's two things I know for sure. The word God scares people. And when I say love in an educational context, people like they start bristling because they think love in the romantic sense. They don't think love in the all-encompassing. And I tell people all the time, love is so big because God is so big. And you always know when it's love because it expands and never constricts. And that's the same as God. Well, I'm gonna just, I'm gonna let that sizzle. Yeah, I'm gonna let that sizzle. Yeah, throw the water on it, run away. I'm gonna let that sizzle, brother. This has been a gift. And like, this is not going to be the only conversation. I say that in faith, right? That, that you and I, man, that, we're brothers to this casket go, bro. In the faith, as co-laborers, trying to, again, to push this ball forward, to move it forward for the kingdom. And when I say that, it is a Kairos moment, and the work that you're doing is for this moment. It's for such a time. Brother, I want to affirm you. I want to encourage you. I want to say that you are respected. You are honored by our Father. But, some of your brothers who are your brother's brother, I'm your brother, and you're my brother. Keep going, brother. And I pray that God continues to strengthen you. You do not grow weary in doing good. So for those people who kind of want to join me in that, and as the village surrounding you with prayer, with support, or just curious or want to get, what do you have coming up? How could they best connect with you, bro?
Well, we're always building in Seattle. So ACE Academy, Washington, you can find us on any of your socials and on the website. So www.aceacademywa.org. And the same way on social media. We got our summer program coming up. I'm super excited about. And then we have our banquet coming up. And then just doing a lot of powerful work in Atlanta, working with ACE Atlanta, which we're building, but also working with young men through my newest endeavor that I'm leading, which is Overtime Elite, which is for young men in a residential program who are highly talented in the world of basketball. And so I've been tasked to lead that charge on the academic side and the youth development side. And so that is the purpose of why I'm here in Miami right now. But we'll be based in Atlanta. And God saw it fit to build a facility, walk away from my house because he knew I didn't like traffic. And that's the God I serve. So that's what I'm doing. But supporting any of those things, specifically ACE, which is a nonprofit, OT doesn't need your support in the same way, would be great. But if nothing else, find a young man or a young lady, because our young ladies need it as well, in your life, and just role model for them. Oftentimes people are asking me, how can I do what you do? And I'm like, I'm probably a little extreme. I wouldn't advise this. But what I would advise is just make a connection with one young person. What they really want is your time and your interests, specifically young people in adolescence who are interdependent and who are biologically natural, but are still looking for a safe place to be. Can be there. I've learned foremost with anything, especially young people, to know different than baby. Watch everything. The honor of my life now to see my students mimic me or ways that I spoke to them. Wow, that's insane. The first young men that I spoke about that brought me into this, I was in one of their weddings. His father couldn't make it to step in, and I the greatest honor of my life. I saw the 12-year-old and the 30-year-old up there pledging his love to his wife, Hawaii, and that's about. That's more than any salary. That's more than any. If we're out there, show the God in you, and you'll be surprised what manifests.
Man, brother, I'm thankful. All gratitude and respect to you, good brother, man. Thank you so much for your work. We're going to be with you on this, man. This is a journey, but this is all our work, man. So thank you again. Thank you for sharing your story, King. I appreciate it, man. All respect.